How's it going, everyone? Appreciate you hopping on. Appreciate you listening. As always, big disclaimer before I kind of dive into anything. I'd just like to preface everything that I'm still an amateur traveler, by no means an expert. So if you see anything that I'm doing that you think you do better, please share. If you appreciate anything that I do, I much prefer that in the comments as well. Again, always open to trying new things. Always like to hear if something that I do has been helpful to anyone else. Like I said, I like to make this channel as interactive as possible. Love feedback. Feedback is the only way you really learn. But anyways, for today's topic, I wanted to take a deeper dive into what I mentioned in my previous video. The first stage or the first step in planning a trip, which is covering which destination you want to pick and how long you want to stay there. I'm going to kind of touch on the documents, or not the documents, but the tools that I use, which is Google Sheets and Google Docs. Kind of show you how I outline my trips, how I go about planning them, how I go about picking different things to do, all that kind of stuff. So it's gonna be a little bit shorter, not as long as the intro video, because I'm gonna cover just one thing, keep it fairly short and sweet. And if you find it helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share a like, share a comment, whatever it is you want to do. Just go ahead and let me know. Now, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and kind of go through my steps and my process. For starting out where I want to go, typically you have to choose the destination first. I know it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but that's just where you have to start. And from there, you can kind of figure out how long you want your trip to be. Now, there's a multitude of ways to figure out how long you want your trip to be. A big factor can be your budget. If you only have X amount of dollars to spend, it kind of limits how much time you can spend in a certain location. But for the sake of example, let's say we have enough for, say, a weekend long trip or a 5-day trip, however long you want it to be. And for this example, we're going to use London, because I've already been to London, so I have a pre-made itinerary that I've already created for myself. Just to show an example, kind of pop over here. Like I said, I always use Google Docs to kind of create a file that I can share with any of my travel companions I created, and then I'll go ahead and share it to them. For anyone that's never shared a link before, it's pretty simple. Just kind of go in here and add a person's email, and it'll go ahead and share. I'm sure most people have done that before, but for those who don't, that's pretty easy process. Can't even speak. Pretty easy process to share to other people. Now, one thing that I want to point out in my trip is I would not recommend doing any of this, going hour by hour. That just can create a little bit of self-stress. It's something I've learned in recent years, that you do not want to overplan a trip. It can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. Hey, I'm not going to be able to have time to do this. Or if you're running late, it doesn't allow for time to just explore a little bit, which is one of the best aspects to traveling, is exploring. So do not overplan. Do not do what I did here. But I just wanted to show this for a sake of example of what I did when I went to London. Now, how did I go about figuring how many days I wanted to spend? For that, pretty much you can go through looking at activities. So look at London, England. Go to TripAdvisor. You can go to things to do, and kind of look at how many things I want to go to when I go to London. Another great way to figure out how many days you want to spend into a city is go to Google. Pretty easy. Just do how many days in London. And now you'll see for here it says spend at least 3 to 4 days. Maybe is 5 days too much? A lot of this actually comes from seasoned travelers or other travel blogs. And as you can see, there's even 3 days in London itinerary. Let's pop in here. You can go ahead and read through it, see what they did, see if there's anything that you can take from this blog that you would want to apply to your own trip, see what tips they have, what they learned. A lot of blogs are pretty useful, especially for research and trying to figure out what you want to do on your own trip and learn from what their mistakes. I know as a traveler, there's plenty of mistakes I've made when I've gone somewhere. That's part of the fun, is figuring out what things you liked and what things you didn't, and sharing it with other people. Like I said, I would not recommend over planning. I don't know if there's anything in particular that I did in this trip that I would recommend to other, but obviously when you create a Google Doc, you can also, on top of planning out your days, add things like extras if you have extra time, food spots that you want to visit if you have time, English food that you want to maybe try out since it's a different corner of the world that maybe you're not familiar with, or has cuisine that you've never tried before. So this is a great place to kind of store all your information for yourself and for other people. You download the app onto your iPhone. You can pull it up on the fly whenever you're traveling. Another reason why I'm a big fan of this tool. Now, back to the planning phase, right? So go through some blogs. Go through some blogs, see what they have. It's going to give you an idea of how much time you probably should spend in this city and how much time you want to spend in the city. Another big, and again, back to another point about budgeting. The budget can also determine how long you can stay in a city. Some cities are more expensive than others, some are cheaper. But for the sake of this, we'll go for 3 days. You can also go to Pinterest and type in London itinerary, see what pops up in here. 3 days, 5 days, 4 days. So you can you've already done a 3-day one, go into a 5-day one, see what they have in there. Go to another this one is not necessarily an itinerary, but it has things you don't want to miss when you go to London. This is all great for researching what you want to do. And I want to keep emphasizing what you want to do, because you got to remember, all these were created by different people who had different preferences, who like different things. So if you see something on one of these itineraries that you do not like, don't do it. It's that simple. You want to pick out things that you want to do on your trip. Again, this is something you're paying for, it's something you're treating yourself to. So pick out things that you want to do when you go on your trip. And from there, you can just build out an itinerary. Say day 1, yada, yada, yada. Also, don't forget that day 1 typically is probably going to be a travel day. So if you leave Thursday, you probably won't be in London until about Friday. Another quick tip here I'll add about traveling that I've learned, especially for international flights, figure out the time zone. So when I went to London, I left from Boston at, I believe, about 8 o'clock at night. The flight itself was, I think, about 6 or 7 hours. I want to say it was about a 7-hour flight, and the time change was plus 5 hours. So I essentially arrived in London at 8 a.m. So I was able to sleep on the flight and kind of just from there went about my day traveling. Highly recommend that to most people. It's a great way to take advantage of days off. It's a great way to take advantage of the amount of time that you have traveling. That way you're not spending it traveling by plane. You're actually enjoying the day there in the city. It's also a great way to bypass jet lag. And a little tip on that one is you always want to stay up on the day of travel to see the sun set. It helps mentally prepare you for the jet lag, helps alleviate it. Also kind of gets you in sync with your sleep schedule. But kind of going a little off topic there, but so day 1, say travel, and then day 2, whatever you want to do in that trip, day 2, whatever you want to do on day 2 in the city. Yeah, we'll just do day 1, day 2 in the city. Day 3, in the city again. And then day 4, say you want to spend it outside of the city. So excursion outside of the city, maybe go to Stonehenge, maybe go to Bath, whatever it is you want to do on that day. Rent a car, take a bus, take a tour, whatever it is, go out, explore some of the countryside. That's your day to do it outside of the city. You can also do 1 day in this city, but I kind of recommend when you go to a city like London, you're probably going to want at least 3 to 4 days, and then you use 1 of the 2 days to kind of go explore outside of the city. And then from there, say day 5, grab a nice breakfast, hop on your flight, maybe get some brunch. I know England goes pretty hard for brunch, so I know this States does now too, but I'm telling you, England goes a little bit harder than the Americans do when it comes to brunching, and that's me speaking as a fellow American. So brunch and then flight home. So that's a simple way to go about picturing out, determining the destination. We went with London, determine the length using Google Docs. Sheets is more for the budgeting. I'll cover that in the next video. But this, like I said, I wanted to keep it fairly short, high level. I want to do a step-by-step process. This is step 1. Step 2 is going to be more about budgeting, step 2 is going to be more about budgeting, and then step 3 will kind of take a deeper dive into activities and how I go about picking those out. That's probably going to be a little bit more interesting. This may or may not be as interesting or useful to most people, but like I said, I wanted to keep it simple. I want to go through a step-by-step process on how I do things. I don't want to spend too much time on one particular video. And again, if you watch something that I'm doing and you think, hey, I actually do this better, please share it with me. I love hearing different things. A lot of things that I've learned were through experience and through word of mouth on what I've seen other people do. I'm like, hey, I like that idea. That actually is something I could do and apply to my planning. And one thing I've learned that I wanted to share with you is do not overplan. It can definitely take away from your trip. And do not, or if you can, take advantage of longer flights going into different time zones. If you could take advantage of that, sleep on the flight, arrive early in the morning at the destination that you're going to, take advantage of that day, and then stay up until nightfall, until the sun sets. That way you can avoid awful jet lag. So that's it for this video. Again, short and sweet. Please let me know if this was useful. Let me know if you have any different tips that you recommend, or just if you want us to do a simple shout and say hi. I'm more than welcome to start up a conversation and talk about travel. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So again, appreciate you listening. Hope you found this useful. Looking forward to talking to you all later.